R&B has always been powered by women who sang from lived experience, voices shaped by love, heartbreak, and survival. From smoky clubs to glittering arenas, these legends defined generations. But time changes everything. Tonight, we look at 15 iconic female R&B singers whose legacies are untouchable, even if their time in the spotlight may finally be winding down. This is not about disrespect. It is about honoring what was and knowing when the curtain call feels earned. Number 15, Diana Ross by Diana Ross. The original Supreme and one of the most recognizable voices in American music history. By the time the 1960s rolled into full swing, Diana Ross was already becoming Motown royalty. Signed to Berry Gordy's Motown Records, she rose as the glamorous face of the Supremes, delivering sleek, pop-leaning soul that crossed racial and cultural lines at a time when few artists could. Her voice was never about power. It was about presence, phrasing, and star quality. Behind the scenes, her rise came with tension. You never find your love if you hide away, cry. Florence Ballard's departure from the Supremes left scars that fans still debate today. As a solo artist, Diana reached incredible highs with chart toppers, Hollywood roles, and global superstardom. Few singers ever transitioned so smoothly from group icon to solo legend. But hearing her perform live in recent years feels different. The voice that once floated effortlessly now leans heavily on backing tracks and audience goodwill. You can still feel the history in the room, but the magic comes more from memory than performance. If number 15 feels like graceful nostalgia, the next entry shows what happens when legend status meets the limits of time. Number 14, Gladys Knight by Gladys Knight. Smiles we gave to one another. The Empress of Soul and a voice that once felt like pure comfort and command. Gladys Knight's career stretches back to the late 1950s, long before most of today's stars were even born. With the Pips, she carved out a sound that balanced gospel depth with pop accessibility. Recording for labels like Motown and later Buddha Records. Songs like Midnight Train to Georgia were not just hits. They were emotional journeys, grounded in resignation, love, and quiet strength. Her voice was always about control rather than flash. Smooth, steady, and deeply human, Gladys sang like someone who had lived every lyric she delivered. Behind the scenes, her career was shaped by constant touring, industry politics, and the struggle of maintaining relevance as musical tastes shifted through the decades. Even into the 1990s and early 2000s, she remained a reliable live performer. But time has finally begun to soften that once ironclad delivery. Recent performances often show a singer leaning on spoken phrasing, shortened notes, and backup singers to fill the emotional gaps. The spirit is still there, but the physical demands of touring clearly weigh heavier now. Watching her today feels less like witnessing a powerhouse and more like attending a respectful farewell tour that never quite gets announced. There is dignity in stepping away while the legacy remains untarnished. If Diana Ross represented pop elegance aging into nostalgia, the next artist brings us into gospel-rooted soul that once shook church walls and radio charts alike. Number 13, Chaka Khan by Chaka Khan.
Would you tell me what you wanna do? Do you feel for me the way I feel for you? Chaka Khan, let me tell you what I want.
The voice of funk soul fire, whose raw power once felt unstoppable. Chaka Khan burst onto the scene in the early 1970s with Rufus, redefining what a female R&B vocalist could sound like. Signed to ABC Records, she brought a fearless edge to soul music, blending funk grit with vocal runs that felt volcanic.
Baby, baby, when I look at you, I know.
Songs like Tell Me Something Good announced a singer who did not just perform a song, but attacked it, bending melodies to her will. As a solo artist, she only grew bolder. Her voice was huge, elastic, and emotional, capable of soft vulnerability one moment and ferocious belts the next. Prince saw that power instantly, crafting I Feel For You as a perfect vehicle for her range and charisma. At her peak, Chaka sounded like she could outsing the band, the crowd, and the decade itself. But that kind of intensity comes at a cost. Years of demanding performances, personal struggles, and inconsistent vocal care have taken their toll. In recent live appearances, that once reliable control sometimes slips. Notes are reached with effort rather than ease, and phrasing can feel rushed or uncertain. The fire is still there emotionally, but the execution no longer matches the memory.
Chaka Khan, let me rock it, that's all I wanna do. Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan.
Watching Chaka today can be heartbreaking because you know how high the bar once was. The audience still cheers out of love and loyalty, not because the performance recreates the magic they fell in love with decades ago. If Gladys Knight showed us graceful endurance, Chaka Khan reminds us what happens when a powerhouse voice fights time head-on. And coming up next is an artist whose smooth sophistication once defined Quiet Storm Radio itself. Number 12, Anita Baker by Anita Baker.
I stand alone at the shore.
The Quiet Storm Queen, whose voice once felt like silk after midnight. Anita Baker emerged in the early 1980s at a time when R&B was shifting toward polish and intimacy. Signed to Elektra Records, she became the defining voice of the Quiet Storm era, delivering songs that did not shout for attention, but gently pulled you closer.
And then came the day I found you.
Her breakthrough album Rapture turned late-night radio into an emotional sanctuary, built on restraint, elegance, and control. What made Anita special was not just tone, but discipline. She sang with economy, never wasting a note, letting silence and breath do as much work as melody. At her peak, she could hold a room completely still, commanding attention without ever raising her voice. It felt personal, almost private, like she was singing directly to you. But that same precision makes aging especially noticeable. In recent performances, her range has narrowed, tempo slow, and the phrasing that once flowed so naturally now feels carefully managed. Add to that her very public frustration with touring, promoters, and modern industry expectations, and you sense an artist who no longer finds joy in the process. The respect is still there. Audiences rise to their feet before she sings a note. Yet the performances themselves feel more ceremonial than immersive, more about honoring a legacy than creating a moment. If Chaka Khan was fire and Gladys Knight was comfort, Anita Baker was intimacy. And coming up next is a singer whose voice once blended gospel power with polished crossover appeal in a way few could match. Number 11, Patti LaBelle by Patti LaBelle. The high-note queen whose gospel-powered voice once shook arenas and church pews alike. Patti LaBelle's rise began in the early 1960s with Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. But her true superstardom arrived decades later when her solo career finally caught up with her vocal gifts. Rooted deeply in gospel, Her singing was fearless, dramatic, and unapologetically big. When she hit a high note, it felt like a declaration, not just a musical choice. Labels, producers, and audiences all knew you booked Patti for impact. Her live shows became legendary for their intensity. She did not just sing songs, she testified through them. Sweat, emotion, and vocal acrobatics were part of the experience, and fans came expecting to be overwhelmed.
As long as you stand here by me, we'll live.
For years, she delivered exactly that. But those towering high notes have become harder to reach. Recent performances often show her approaching climactic moments cautiously, leaning on backing vocals or speaking lines she once soared through. The passion remains undeniable, but the physical demands of her signature style now feel like a battle rather than a release. Watching Patti today still inspires respect, but it also raises a quiet question. When your greatest strength was raw vocal power, what happens when time asks you to let that go? If Anita Baker was about restraint and Patti LaBelle was about explosion, the next artist lived somewhere in between, blending emotional vulnerability with pop soul sophistication. Number 10, Mary J. Blige by Mary J. Blige.
Get it crunk upon that fun upon up in this dancery.
The queen of hip-hop soul, whose pain once sounded like survival set to music. Mary J. Blige arrived in the early 1990s, on Uptown Records carrying something R&B had not fully heard before. Rawness, vulnerability, street-level honesty. Her debut changed the emotional language of the genre, blending rugged beats with wounded vocals that felt lived in and real.
Everybody get on now, cause you know we got to get it wrong.
She was not polished, she was truthful, and that truth resonated deeply with a generation learning to feel out loud. At her peak, Mary's voice cracked in the most human way. It was not about technical perfection, it was about emotional connection. Songs became confessionals, and live performances felt like shared therapy sessions between artist and audience. You did not just listen, you related. But decades of touring, emotional wear, and vocal strain have altered that connection.
Hateration, holleration, in this dancery. Let's get it.
Recent live shows often reveal a singer leaning heavily on backing tracks, shortened vocal phrases, and crowd participation to carry moments she once owned outright. The grit is still there emotionally, but the vocal control that anchored her storytelling feels increasingly inconsistent. Mary remains a cultural icon, and her influence is everywhere. You hear her in countless modern R&B artists who learned that imperfection could be powerful. Still, watching her perform today can feel bittersweet. The songs hit because we remember who we were when we first heard them, not because the performance recreates that original fire. If Patti LaBelle was built on vocal athleticism, Mary J. Blige was built on emotional endurance, and coming up next is a singer whose smooth confidence once ruled the charts with elegance rather than pain. Number 9, Toni Braxton by Toni Braxton.
I'll always think of you inside of my private thought.
The velvet-voiced superstar whose lower register once felt like pure luxury. Toni Braxton emerged in the early 1990s as a revelation. Signed to LaFace Records under the guidance of Babyface and L.A. Reid, she brought a sound that felt instantly timeless. Her contralto voice was rich, smoky, and unmistakably adult, standing out in an era crowded with high belts and flashy runs.
And in my mind, for you, I think I might be
Songs like her early ballads made heartbreak feel expensive, slow-burning, and deeply personal. At her peak, Toni's voice seemed effortless. She did not overpower a song. She sank into it. Every note felt deliberate, every pause meaningful. That restraint made her one of the most imitated vocalists of her generation. But behind the scenes, her career was marked by label disputes, financial struggles, and health issues that quietly reshaped her relationship with performing. Lupus and vocal strain have forced her to adapt, and modern live performances often reveal a singer carefully conserving energy. Notes that once floated now arrive gently, sometimes cautiously. Backing tracks and altered arrangements help maintain the mood, but longtime fans notice the difference immediately. What makes this shift difficult is that Toni's magic always lived in subtlety. When even a little of that control fades, the illusion breaks. The songs still matter. The memories still rush in. But the performances now feel more like elegant reminders of greatness than living proof of it. If Mary J. Blige carried her scars openly and Toni Braxton wrapped hers in silk, the next artist brings us back to raw vocal power rooted in gospel tradition. And trust me, the contrast is striking. Number 8, Erykah Badu. By Erykah Badu.
Right here, what we're gonna do is go back.
The neo-soul trailblazer whose mystique once felt revolutionary. When Erykah Badu arrived in the mid-1990s, she sounded like nothing else on the radio. Signed to Kedar Entertainment and Universal, she became the spiritual center of the neo-soul movement. Blending jazz phrasing, hip-hop rhythms, and Afrocentric philosophy into a sound that felt both ancient and futuristic. Her voice was not about range. It was about vibe, phrasing, and mood. You did not just hear her songs, you drifted inside them. At her peak, Erykah's performances felt hypnotic. She bent time, stretched melodies, and let silence speak. The unpredictability was part of the appeal. No two shows felt the same, and fans loved that sense of mystery.
He moved around and we kept in touch through his friend Mike.
But that same looseness has become more frustrating than freeing in recent years. Modern live performances often feel unfocused, with extended improvisations, spoken tangents, and arrangements that drift far from the emotional core of the songs. Vocally, she still has moments of beauty, but consistency has become elusive. What once felt experimental now sometimes feels disengaged, as if the performance exists more for the artist than the audience. Erykah's cultural impact is unquestionable. She helped change the direction of R&B itself. But watching her today can feel like witnessing a legend circling her own mythology rather than delivering the connection fans came for. If Toni Braxton was precision and Erykah Badu was atmosphere, the next artist brings us back to gospel-fueled power that once shook the foundations of soul music. If these voices from R&B's golden years are bringing back memories, tap that like button. It helps keep these stories alive, and we have 7 more legends still to come. Number 7, Aretha Franklin. By Aretha Franklin.
When I wake up,
The undisputed queen of soul whose voice once felt eternal. Aretha Franklin's legacy was already sealed by the late 1960s. Signed to Atlantic Records, she turned gospel-rooted power into secular revelation, recording songs that did more than top charts. They shifted culture. Her voice carried authority, pain, joy, and defiance all at once. When Aretha sang, it sounded like truth being spoken out loud. For decades, her live performances were events. She could sit at a piano and command a room with a single phrase. Even into the 1990s, her voice retained an astonishing depth and emotional weight. But the later years told a different story. Health struggles, limited mobility, and physical strain made performances increasingly rare and unpredictable. When she did appear on stage late in her career, the reverence was overwhelming. Audiences stood before she sang a note. Yet vocally, the once effortless command had softened. Notes were shortened, tempos slowed, and arrangements adjusted to protect what remained. The power was still there in flashes, but no longer consistently. Aretha's passing closed a chapter that can never be rewritten. In her final years, retirement might have preserved the mystery rather than testing it. Still, her influence towers over every artist on this list. She did not just sing R&B, she defined it. If Erykah Badu blurred boundaries and Aretha Franklin built the foundation, the next artist took that foundation into the pop mainstream with elegance and crossover brilliance. And the countdown only gets heavier from here. Number 6, Whitney Houston by Whitney Houston. The voice that once felt like it came straight from heaven. Whitney Houston entered the music world in the mid-1980s as something close to a miracle. Signed to Arista Records under Clive Davis, she possessed a voice that combined gospel training, pop precision, and effortless range. Everything about her sounded clean, pure, and impossibly controlled.
Clock strikes upon the hour and the sun begins.
At her peak, Whitney did not chase notes. They came to her. Radio, award shows, and live stages all bent around that voice. Her early career felt unstoppable. Every single seemed destined for the top of the charts, and her live performances often sounded better than the studio versions. But behind the perfection, the pressure was immense. Constant touring, public scrutiny, and personal struggles began to chip away at the instrument that defined her.
Been in love and lost my senses, spinning through the...
In her later years, performances became unpredictable. Some nights offered flashes of the old brilliance. Others revealed a voice worn thin by time and hardship. Audiences showed love and patience, often singing along to carry moments she once owned entirely. The reverence never faded, but the reality became harder to ignore. Whitney's legacy is untouchable. No list of R&B singers exists without her at the center. Yet, watching her final performances felt like witnessing a legend fighting expectations that no human voice could sustain forever. And trust me, if number 6 already feels heavy, what's coming next digs even deeper into the tension between legendary status and the passage of time. Number 5, Roberta Flack by Roberta Flack.
His fingers, singing my life with his words.
The gentle storyteller whose voice once whispered straight into the heart. Roberta Flack emerged in the early 1970s as something rare in popular music. Signed to Atlantic Records, she brought classical training, jazz sensitivity, and folk-like intimacy into R&B and pop. Her breakout moment came not from force, but from patience. Songs like her early ballads unfolded slowly, inviting listeners to lean in rather than brace for impact.
He just kept right on, strumming my back with his...
At her peak, Roberta's voice was all about restraint. She understood the power of quiet better than most singers understand volume. Each phrase felt deliberate, almost conversational, as if she was sharing a secret rather than performing a hit. That approach made her recordings timeless and deeply emotional, especially in an era dominated by bigger, louder voices. But time has been unkind to subtlety.
Strumming my back.
As her health declined, live performances became increasingly rare and fragile. The softness that once felt intentional began to sound cautious, with phrasing shortened and notes carefully navigated. Fans listened with respect rather than expectation, aware they were witnessing a legend doing her best under difficult circumstances. Roberta's influence still echoes through modern soul and adult contemporary music, yet her later appearances felt more like ceremonial acknowledgments than true performances. Sometimes the most loving decision a legend can make is to let the recording speak forever.
Alive with his words, killing me softly.
If Whitney Houston showed us the cost of perfection, Roberta Flack reminds us how fragile beauty can be. And coming up next is an artist whose cool sophistication once dominated the charts with effortless confidence. Number 4, Sade by Sade.
Ruling the way that I move.
The embodiment of cool, whose voice once felt like midnight itself. Sade Adu entered the 1980s with a presence that rewrote the rules of R&B and soul. Signed to Epic Records, she brought elegance back to popular music at a time when excess ruled the airwaves. Her voice was never about range or power. It was about mood, tone, and restraint.
Show me how deep love can be.
Songs moved slowly, confidently, like they knew they did not need to rush to be remembered. At her peak, Sade's music felt timeless even as it was released. The band's sound blended jazz, soul, and pop into something impossibly smooth. Live performances were controlled, intimate, and hypnotic. She did not perform for attention. She commanded it quietly.
Won't catch me running. Oh, cherish the day.
That sense of mystery became part of the appeal, but that same mystique has become a barrier in recent years. Long absences between albums and rare live appearances have turned anticipation into uncertainty. When she does appear, the voice remains recognizable, but the emotional immediacy feels distant. Performances rely heavily on atmosphere and visuals rather than vocal presence.
Cherish the day. Won't go astray.
Sade's legacy is flawless precisely because she has been so selective. Yet, the question lingers. Sometimes knowing when not to return preserves the magic better than chasing it. The silence has arguably become part of her story. If Roberta Flack taught us the power of softness and Sade taught us the power of restraint, the next artist shows what happens when raw honesty meets decades of wear and tear. And the countdown is about to get uncomfortably real. Number 3, Tina Turner by Tina Turner.
Just understand, the touch of your hand makes my bow.
The survivor, whose voice once roared with fire, grit, and pure willpower. Tina Turner's story is inseparable from endurance. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, she was already electrifying stages with a voice that sounded like gravel and lightning at the same time.
More than that, oh, what's love got to do?
Signed to multiple labels across her career, her breakthrough rebirth in the 1980s turned her into a global rock and R&B icon. Tina did not just sing songs, she burned through them, leaving sweat, emotion, and truth behind. Her live performances were legendary because they demanded everything from her body. Dancing in heels, commanding massive stages, and singing with raw intensity night after night came at a cost.
Oh, what's love got to do? It's got to do with it.
But she gave audiences everything she had, every single time. There was no half measure in a Tina Turner show. As the years passed, the physical toll became impossible to ignore. Health struggles and sheer exhaustion eventually made performing unsustainable. When Tina officially stepped away, it felt like an act of self-preservation rather than surrender. The fire that defined her could not be maintained forever without destroying the person behind it. In her later public appearances, the reverence was overwhelming. People did not expect the roar anymore. They simply wanted to honor the woman who survived it all. Tina's retirement was not a loss. It was a victory. If Sade represented cool control and Tina Turner represented raw survival, then what's coming next is a name so legendary that even discussing stepping away feels almost impossible. Trust me, number 2 will stir emotions. Number 2, Janet Jackson. By Janet Jackson.
Seen the world been to many places.
The architect of modern pop R&B whose precision once set the standard. Janet Jackson stepped out of her family's shadow in the mid-1980s and quietly changed the entire sound of popular music. Signed to A&M Records, she fused R&B, funk, pop, and New Jack Swing into something sleek, rhythmic, and deeply intentional.
Many different places.
Her voice was never about vocal dominance. It was about control, timing, and atmosphere. Janet sang like she danced. Every move had purpose. At her peak, Janet's live shows were masterclasses in discipline. Tight choreography, clean vocals, and emotional restraint created an experience that felt futuristic and human at the same time.
Something was missing about you.
Albums became cultural events, shaping fashion, dance, and the language of pop R&B for decades to come. But time has shifted the balance. Recent performances lean heavily on choreography and backing tracks, with vocals often secondary to spectacle. The connection feels rehearsed rather than lived in. What once felt groundbreaking now feels carefully preserved, almost museum-like. Janet's legacy is undeniable. Nearly every modern pop R&B performer owes her a debt. Yet watching her today feels less like witnessing evolution and more like watching an icon maintain a template that no longer surprises. Sometimes influence outgrows performance, and that may be where Janet now stands. And if number 2 felt complicated, prepare yourself. Because number 1 is not just controversial. It forces us to confront how fame, controversy, and endurance collide at the very end of a long career. Number 1, Madonna by Madonna.
Some boys kiss me, some boys hug me. I think they're
The ultimate provocateur whose ambition reshaped pop and R&B crossover forever. Madonna's influence on R&B adjacent pop culture is impossible to escape. Emerging in the early 1980s on Sire Records, she absorbed club music, soul, funk, and dance rhythms and repackaged them with fearless ambition.
right with me. If they can't raise my interest.
Her voice was never the point. Vision was. She understood timing, controversy, and reinvention better than anyone else in popular music. Every era felt intentional, calculated, and unavoidable. At her peak, Madonna performances were cultural moments. Fashion, choreography, shock, and spectacle carried the experience. Vocally, she relied on attitude and phrasing rather than range, and that worked because the songs and presentation did the heavy lifting. For decades, she stayed ahead by constantly moving forward. But recent years have been difficult to watch. Live performances now feel physically strained, vocally thin, and emotionally disconnected. The shock factor that once felt rebellious now lands as uncomfortable. Reinvention has given way to chasing relevance, and the balance between legacy and spectacle feels broken.
I am a material girl, you know that we are living in.
What makes this painful is not a lack of respect. Madonna earned her place, but when the performance distracts from the music rather than elevating it, the conversation changes. Sometimes knowing when to stop is the final act of control. From gospel powerhouses to pop architects, these women built the foundation of modern R&B and soul. Their songs still live forever, even when the stage no longer calls. Thank you for taking this nostalgic journey with us. If you love deep dives into music history, subscribe, and keep the rhythm alive. And click the end screen to watch our next video, 15 underrated Canadian R&B bands you should know. Let's keep the soul rolling.